This video and the next two will be discussing my opinion of what might be a reasonable religion. The question comes up, especially to atheists, can there be a reasonable religion? Is it possible to exist, to be religious and be reasonable? These people are obviously not reasonable. They're borderline crazy. At a minimum, they're blasphemous, and they're quite disgusting. This fellow has no idea what a logically inconsistent statement is. He is neither rational nor reasonable. We can never expect him to be so. Not all Muslims and Christians are like these people, but the question comes up, is it even possible to be religious and be reasonable in your religion? That's the subject of this and the next two videos. I will discuss my opinion of what a reasonable religion would be like, its philosophy, theology, and practice. I believe, firstly, that a reasonable religion would look at the evidence for the existence of God and decide if that evidence is compelling. If the evidence is compelling, obviously one could be a believer and be reasonable. If, however, it is not compelling, a reasonable religion would accept that the evidence for God is not compelling. When speaking of evidence, I always think of Martin Gardner. I'm a great fan. The late Martin Gardner was a popular science writer. He wrote many books on popularizing science, mathematics. He wrote mathematical games for Scientific American for many years. I enjoyed his writing and his books. I highly recommend them. In one of his books, Gotcha, he presents paradoxes. I like paradoxes. I think they help us to understand how we think and help us to think about thinking. He presents paradoxes of game theory, set theory, truth values. He presents paradoxes of philosophy, such as free will. But I would like to discuss the paradox in which he presents in the book about evidence. He presents a paradox called Hempel's ravens. Professor Carl Hempel came up with a simple hypothesis to test our ideas about what consists of evidence. Professor Hempel proposed the hypothesis that all crows are black. So, each time we find a black crow, that confirms the hypothesis. The more black crows we find, the more the hypothesis is confirmed. If we ever find a white, blue, or purple crow, the hypothesis is destroyed. Good enough. If we find black things which are not crows, they are neutral. They do not refute the hypothesis, but they don't confirm it. However, there is an odd corollary to the all crows are black hypothesis, which is all non-black things are not crows. This leads to a paradox. If we find something that is not black and not a crow, it confirms that non-black things are not crows, but does it also confirm the corollary that all crows are black? This confusion of evidence can make us think twice about what we consider evidence. Now would be a good time to pause the video and look closely at the last page and this page, or better yet, find the book at your local library and read it. It's delightful. Nonetheless, what really constitutes evidence can sometimes be deceiving. Obviously, an ornithologist sitting in his office looking at things that aren't black and aren't crows isn't doing field work. Some religious people seem to take sketchy evidence of a similar sort as evidence that God exists. What is the evidence for the existence of God? A lot of people propose a lot of things. One of them is the order, nature of the universe, cosmology, the laws of nature, the fine-tuning. But scientists explain about the cosmos, the age of the universe, the age of the earth, life on earth, without resorting to discussion of God. They don't discuss the God hypothesis. Some people say nature is so beautiful that They're filled with emotion, and that emotion must come from God. But nature isn't always beautiful. They just enjoy some parts of nature, which very, very much are beautiful. And they ignore some of the more disgusting and disturbing parts of nature. It's red in tooth and claw, and sometimes it's absolutely horrific. This wasp is laying eggs inside this living caterpillar. The caterpillar will continue to grow until the larvae hatch and destroy the caterpillar. When Charles Darwin studied these wasps, he was horrified and wondered, how could a loving God create such an animal? Darwin and others have explained, without resorting to God, the diversity and wonder of life on Earth. Scientists have explained many things without discussing the God hypothesis. Science is not anti-God, but it doesn't prove God. Looking around at the natural world, we know so much, we've learned so much, and mankind will learn so much more, that the natural world and its existence seems like no proof at all that God exists. So if we can't use the natural world to provide evidence for the existence of God empirically, what about personal experience? People say, I prayed and my prayers were answered. Someone intervened on my behalf. I prayed and received an insight. In some way or another, I resolved my problems after having prayed. Close your eyes if you're squeamish. I'm warning you. I'll tell you when you can open them. What about this cat? Some could say, well, it's a miracle he survived having an arrow shot through his head. On the other hand, he had an arrow shot through his head. That can't be a good thing. Now you can open your eyes if you're squeamish. Wouldn't he have been better off, that cat with the arrow through his head, to be like these cats, scampering around with no arrows through their heads? More importantly, what about all the cats who didn't receive a miracle? The roadkill cats. I'm not going to show one. Look at the fluffy kitty, but remember all the cats you've seen flattened on the road. And they didn't survive the cars like the other cats survived the arrows. God's intervention is hard to show sometimes. Imagine all the people who, on 9/11, prayed and died. They can't tell us that they prayed and died. They can't testify of the non-miracle, nor can the people who died in the Holocaust testify of the non-miracles, answers to their prayers. Obviously, if you die, you can't tell others about how your prayer did not save you. Consider lottery winners. Everyone hears about the man who won the lottery. They publicize it to encourage people to buy lottery tickets. But what about all the people who buy lottery tickets all their lives and never win a significant amount of money? We know they didn't build Las Vegas because most gamblers win. That's obvious. And yet people go to Las Vegas hoping to win, and when someone does win a big jackpot, it's highly publicized to encourage others to try. Far more people lose than win. Some people lose terrible amounts and are left destitute. So personal experience, while it may convince one person of the existence of God, cannot be translated to other people because it's not their experience. And we see many people who haven't obviously had that experience. Empirical evidence, then, for the existence of God doesn't really cut it on a natural level or on a personal level. You can say you have a personal experience, but others probably can't see it, and if they think hard about it, they probably have to set it aside. They can't use it as evidence. Then where does that leave the faithful? Can a person have faith reasonably without evidence? Is there any hope? I know, I had to use that picture. Is there any hope that we can have a reasonable faith? Can we have a faith and admit there is no good evidence for God? Well, I'd like to go back to Martin Gardner, the skeptic and science popularizer, of whom I'm a great fan. He reconciled it this way. He said, faith is indeed quixotic. It is absurd. Let us admit it. Let us concede everything. To a rational mind, the world looks like a world without God. It looks like a world with no hope for another life. To think otherwise, to believe in spite of appearances, is surely a kind of madness. I am quite content to confess that I have no basis whatever for my belief in God, other than a passionate longing that God exists, and that I and others will not cease to exist. Because I believe with all my heart that God upholds all things, it follows that I believe that my leap of faith, in a way beyond my comprehension, is God outside of me asking me and wanting me to believe, and God within me responding. So he believes in a leap of faith. Is it possible to have a leap of faith and a reasonable religion? Perhaps. That's what I'll discuss in the next videos. I hope I didn't bore you.